Hello again, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips joined by Wes Mitchell to talk some Gamecock football. Wes, a big weekend for the Gamecock staff this past weekend with Junior Day taking place. Some of the top juniors across the Southeast coming in for a visit. Talk about Junior Day this year, Wes, and I understand we had as many as 20 kids on campus this weekend, and a big day for the coaching staff to get a look at some of next year's top prospects.
Yeah, Junior Day always a big deal because it basically is an excuse to get a bunch of top guys in theory on campus, and that's what South Carolina was able to do on Saturday afternoon. Started at 10 a.m., went till about 3:30 in the afternoon, I guess, for some kids, and was a situation where, you bring them in, give them a tour, let them meet the staff, let them kind of see how they'd be used if they went to South Carolina. And, basically, I think a lot of times people think that it's like a camp, but it's really not. There's actually no on-the-field action. There's no actual football. It's just more about kind of a glorified unofficial visit. You get guys in, let them meet each other too, and maybe even start talking about playing together potentially. So, everybody does these nowadays. Every school in the country does just about, I think. But very, very important as far as the process goes, because it's just an excuse to get kids on your campus. Early on in the process. Now that recruiting is a 24/7, 365 deal. So even though they just signed the 2016 class a couple of weeks ago, it's on to 2017 almost immediately. And South Carolina, of course, doing all they can, still playing catch up. I think, because generally, if you think about it, these guys are already being recruited by other teams in the country, sometimes for a full year earlier from now. So. Really was important for South Carolina to get some of these guys on campus.
Right. Junior Day is not a camp. There's no workouts, no drills, just really more of an official meet and greet and a chance for the coaching staff to get to know some of the top players that will be a part of the 2017 signing class. So, Wes, let's talk about a few of the young men that were on campus this weekend. I understand they took in the Kentucky basketball game on Saturday, in addition to getting a tour of facilities and the campus and talking about academics and all these different kind of things. And wanted to talk about a couple of the in-state prospects first. Wes, let's start with Ortre Smith. This is a player that I like very much. He's out of Wando High School in Mount Pleasant, 6'4", 210-pound wide receiver, coming off a huge junior year. Wando scored a tremendous amount of points, and he was their go-to guy on offense.
Yeah, Ortre, a big-time player and a big target for South Carolina. And kind of one of those guys, I think that if South Carolina lands, he's kind of the statement recruit for South Carolina to go out and get the top, one of the top wide receivers in the Southeast, arguably the top player in the state of South Carolina for his class. And, Ortre is a kid that the previous staff was working pretty hard, but I think now under the new staff, Will Muschamp, pretty much personally helping recruit Ortre and, making him feel wanted. I think this weekend was a big, big deal for him to get on campus, see how he'd be used, see, what the plans are for him. So, I think moving forward, it's a situation where Ortre has family ties to Clemson. His mom actually went to Clemson, was a student athlete at Clemson, and that also is always going to weigh heavily, I think, with Ortre. But I think also he wants to kind of make his own name, take his own path. And, I think South Carolina's firmly in it, possibly even in the league. You look at Clemson, they actually picked up an out-of-state commitment from a big-time wide receiver on Sunday. So, you look at kind of Clemson's recruiting efforts, a little bit more of an out-of-state focus, where South Carolina, as most staffs do when they take over at a place, you look at them kind of trying to recruit from inside the state and then branching outwards. So, I think with both Ortre and Shi Smith, the other wide receiver who's considered one of the top players in the state, while Clemson is making a focus for some out-of-state receivers and in really good shape to land some of those guys, South Carolina is really honed in on these kids, and I think to this point it's working and has put them in good shape with them.
Ortre Smith, according to Rivals.com, the number 3 prospect in South Carolina for next year's class, the 2017 class, wide receiver out of Wando, and he was on campus this past weekend for the Gamecocks Junior Day. Wes, you mentioned Shi Smith, the receiver from Union County. He played there for Steve Tannehill, the former Gamecock quarterback. Any chance that the Gamecocks may have an edge on him because of the fact that he played for Steve Tannehill?
Well, and Shi actually was not at the Junior Day. He was actually on campus on Wednesday this week. So they had both Shi Smith and Ortre Smith on campus at some point in the last week or so. And, I understand Steve Tannehill was actually with Shi Smith on that unofficial visit, even though Tannehill no longer the coach at Union. I think there's still some influence there with him obviously playing for him. And, again, this is a battle that I think South Carolina and Clemson are heavily involved in. Clemson's been very, very strong there early on, but depending on who you ask, I've heard Shi, did kind of grow up following the South Carolina program. I think North Carolina was a program that was kind of in there with Shi early on too, kind of strong. So these are recruiting battles that are still yet to play out. But at the same time, I think you look at both Ortre and Shi in South Carolina, considering, that it's a brand new staff, considering they've only been on campus for about 2.5 months. I think South Carolina probably feels pretty good about the progress they've made with those two guys. And, they'll, of course, continue to try to do that into the spring and into the summer camp circuit.
All right, Shi Smith from Union County, the number 1 rated prospect in the state, according to Rivals.com, for the 2017 class. This is Gamecock Central Radio. I'm Emerson Phillips, joined by Wes Mitchell. We invite you to download the new phone apps that allow you to listen to Gamecock Central Radio on your phone. We have an iPhone app and an Android app, and we're also on iTunes. Just search Gamecock Central Radio for all 3. Wes, another in-state product, a local kid, a Gamecock legacy, Damani Staley, defensive lineman / linebacker from Ridgeview High, playing for Perry Parks. Perry Parks, a Sumter County native who played for David Bennett at Coastal Carolina, and Ridgeview people really like Damani Staley. This is Deuce Staley's son, and a kid that had a very big junior year for Ridgeview, a rejuvenated Ridgeview program under new head coach Perry Parks, and being that he's Deuce's son, Wes, I think a lot of folks are excited about this kid. I know Coach Parks has said repeatedly that Damani Staley has as good a motor as any kid that he's coached at the high school level. So this is a player that the Gamecocks are obviously very interested in. Gamecocks need help on the D-line and at linebacker.
Yeah, Damani Staley was kind of able to take his, he's obviously been on campus before, but his first, big visit with the new staff. And, I hear that visit went well. And, this is a kid that I think South Carolina's in very, very good shape with early on. I was over at Ridgeview, I guess it's been maybe a month ago now, maybe 3 weeks or so. He said South Carolina, was already his leader. South Carolina stands out to him. And I actually thought there might be a chance of him going ahead and pulling the trigger and committing to South Carolina this weekend, but then was told beforehand that, some other big-name schools, namely Michigan, Ohio State, I think Tennessee as well, have started to push into the mix, have not offered yet, but could be next to offer for Damani Staley. And, he wants to check out some other schools. He wants to see what direction his recruitment takes before he starts to actually, potentially make a decision. But still, at the end of the day, I think you look at the fact that, Muschamp was by the school. Muschamp has made him feel like a priority. He is a legacy guy. South Carolina really got the jump on some of these other schools. Other major programs are showing interest. Georgia Tech and East Carolina have offered, but these other big-name schools obviously are going to be later in the boat than South Carolina as far as offering. So, I think that's something that's going to stand out as this process goes on for him. And, if you really look at it, I think there's just probably too many factors going South Carolina's way at the end for other schools to feel good about getting the kid. Now, I think he's a really good fit at South Carolina. They want to upgrade that buck position, which is a hybrid defensive end linebacker spot, and I think that actually fits Damani Staley almost perfect.
Muschamp has made it no secret that he's going to make in-state recruiting much more of a priority, and he got to work on that the day he was hired, and we continue to see that with his interest in some of these prospects that we're talking about here that'll be part of the 2017 class. Ortre Smith, the receiver from Wando, already has offers, according to Rivals, from Florida State, Louisville, East Carolina, Wake Forest, and South Carolina, among others. Shai Smith, the receiver from Union County, the top-rated player in the state heading into next year, and Damani Staley, the defensive lineman from Ridgeview. Deuce Staley's son, another one of the players that the Gamecocks are after as we look ahead to 2017 recruiting. Gamecock Central Radio, Emerson Phillips and Wes Mitchell. You can get breaking Gamecock news alerts delivered to your email inbox. All you got to do is text USC to 42828. Text USC to 42828, or check out the Gamecock Central homepage for more information. Wes, another point of emphasis for Will Muschamp and this new Gamecock staff is making Charlotte more of a priority for Gamecock football recruiting. Talk about Muschamp's effort to improve the Gamecocks' presence and recruiting results in Charlotte.
Yeah, I think Charlotte is one of 3 out-of-state areas that are going to be treated like in-state areas for South Carolina. Charlotte, Atlanta, Jacksonville, basically easy trips for people trying to get, between any of those spots and Columbia. You hop on the interstate and you're there. So, Jacksonville, obviously an area that I think has been pretty kind to South Carolina under Steve Spurrier. Atlanta, an area that South Carolina has recruited well and will have to continue to recruit well. They had Trey Blount, a 4-star wide receiver from that area, on campus on Saturday for the junior day. And then Charlotte, I think an area that really has probably been under-recruited for South Carolina in the past. That's an area I think they have to up their game in. They're actually in pretty good shape with 2 kids, in T.J. Moore and Eric Douglas, who are both big offensive linemen there at the powerhouse Mallard Creek program in Charlotte. I think that's a good step for South Carolina. They had several other kids on campus from that area that we've got updates on there on the site. And, I think when you're looking at South Carolina's roster in the future, that they're always going to spot recruit other areas. There's always going to be kids popping up for other areas. But I think you look, there's just going to be a lot of guys on this roster that's either going to have South Carolina, Charlotte, Atlanta, or Jacksonville beside their names as far as hometowns. I think that those guys are going to take up a large portion of the roster moving forward.
Will Muschamp has stated that you've got to be able to recruit a 5-hour radius from your campus, and that includes obviously Jacksonville and Atlanta and all of North Carolina. And Wes, the state of Georgia has been very good to South Carolina in terms of recruiting for many years, and we know that Muschamp and his staff are working players in Atlanta for the 2017 class and beyond, and assistant coach Travaris Robinson, obviously being a South Florida native, has helped the Gamecocks create more of a presence in that part of the country as well. That's outside of the 5-hour radius from Columbia, obviously, but there is so much talent in South Florida. Travaris Robinson, a major addition to the Gamecock staff because of his ability to recruit that area, and we've already seen some of the results of Coach Robinson's work down there with the Gamecocks landing Xavier Thomas, early enrollee freshman who's already on campus. Defensive lineman, had 22 sacks his senior year of high school. So Muschamp brought in this diverse, young, aggressive staff that's anxious and eager to go out and recruit a very broad area, and they're doing that. Atlanta, Charlotte, Jacksonville, all areas in between a focus, but South Florida, an area of emphasis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll see that continue moving forward. Not any South Florida guys that I'm aware of that were on campus this weekend, just because that is a more difficult trip. I think you look a lot of times you get those guys on campus in groups. They'll kind of all play together in 7-on-7 settings, or either work out together with a certain trainer, and you'll see those guys kind of all travel together and hit maybe 5-8 schools or even more all at once. And I think you have to get on the tour list almost, as far as getting those guys on your campus and kind of making an impact there. So not as often do you see them on campus for these junior days, just because of the travel issues.
Right.
But certainly South Florida, an area that Travaris Robinson, his ties along, his reputation along, and just the relationship that he has with coaches and kids down there makes South Carolina a viable option for the kids there.
Gamecock Junior Day took place this past Saturday, and Wes, wanted to get you to talk about, highlight, if you will, a few of the other recruits that were on campus and some names for Gamecock fans to keep an eye on moving forward.
Well, I think you have to talk about Xavier Thomas. He is arguably the top prospect in the state of South Carolina, regardless of class. He is a 2018 kid at Wilson High School in Florence. He has basically got the top three schools of South Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State. And, those schools, I think, are going to battle for him for a long time. But this kid is a absolute freak on the field, a really, really good football player, has a chance to step right in, I think whatever school he picks and play right away. He just, I think is probably one of the better prospects in South Carolina the last couple of years. And it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out, true old-school recruiting battle. But South Carolina has basically made him their number one priority, their number one target. He's another, kind of like I mentioned with Ortre Smith. He's kind of he would be a signature win for South Carolina, I think, on the recruiting trail. For them to keep a guy like that home, keep him in state of South Carolina. He grew up a South Carolina fan, so that it's something where when you have guys like that in your state that grew up watching the program, that grew up wanting to play in the program, and have offers from all over, you really have to try to find a way to keep them, inside the state. And when he's a defensive guy as well, and you have a defensive head coach, it's just absolutely key to win those battles. And I think South Carolina, looking ahead long term, I actually personally think that they should get the kid in the end. But I do think it's going to be a long, tough, drawn-out matchup as they look to land this kid, Xavier Thomas, who I think is a name that everybody who remotely follows recruiting is going to want to follow and remember, because his name's going to get even bigger. He's got about 10 offers right now, but you look at the film and he's just a monster off the edge, plays some offense as well, and he's outrunning guys. He's about 6'3.5", 240 pounds, and is just running past defenses on offense. So really, really talented player in Xavier Thomas.
All right, remember the name, Xavier Thomas from Wilson High School in Florence, part of the 2018 class. Wes, a number of the recruits that the Gamecocks are working on right now have talked about a new energy around Gamecock football that has been brought by this Will Muschamp staff. There seems to be a little bit of buzz around Gamecock football that maybe has died down a little bit in the last couple of years of the Steve Spurrier era. So talk about the effects that could have on recruiting. And, you always got to have a little excitement around your program when you're trying to recruit these teenage kids. You like there to be some buzz around your program, and it feels like Muschamp has brought some of that to Gamecock football.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you look at this staff, again, you got a lot of either young guys on staff that almost immediately can relate to the prospects, or B, that the older guys are guys that have been through recruiting battles, have been through recruiting wars, have coached in the SEC, so they really have the resume and the experience to point to. And I think all those things are key when you're building a staff, and that energy is something that is very, very obvious. All the kids we've talked to have mentioned it after the junior day, have mentioned how excited they were, to have that opportunity to kind of meet with Muschamp and the staff. And, a lot of these junior days are very, very similar. There's only so much you can change. I know one thing that was mentioned to us as being different is that they actually kind of introduced a player panel as well, where they had a couple of current players who were available to answer questions, and the coaching staff actually left the room and essentially said, here's your opportunity to ask some current players any question you want about being at South Carolina, without us in the room to kind of mold the conversation, I guess. That was something that was new that I heard was pretty popular. The rest of the stuff is stuff that, you're going to see it about every junior day. Every school is going to talk about upcoming facilities. Every school is going to talk about their schemes and how they want to use you. And every school is going to highlight their positives. But, I think just the experience of this coaching staff in big-time major SEC programs and recruiting major talents is something that is very much going to be something that's a positive for South Carolina, and it's going to pay off on the recruiting trail going forward.
Final thoughts today, Wes. Where does Gamecock football go from here with recruiting now that junior day is over, and how long until spring practice gets underway?
Spring practice starts March 15th, so we're less than or right around a month away, I guess, right at a month away. And then, it doesn't stop here with recruiting. Obviously, they have to continue to try to get guys on campus. And there's actually going to be other junior days as well. There'll be at least one more junior day for South Carolina. I could see them even possibly adding 2 more if they feel the need to. So, going forward, South Carolina, obviously, in a situation where they're still playing a little bit of catch-up, but I think this past weekend was a big step forward for them as far as starting to figure out. The other thing you want to find out on these junior days is who's interested in you. As a school, I think for a guy to say, look, I care enough about South Carolina, because there are other junior days going on. Georgia had a junior day on Saturday as well. So for guys to say, I'm going to take the time out of my day to go spend my day at South Carolina, sometimes versus, going to another school, that allows the coaching staff to say, okay, this kid is serious about the program. This kid is serious about being recruited by South Carolina. So that allows the staff to sort of start to mold what they internally think this class could look like moving forward.
All right, the Gamecock staff are serious about recruiting, and we're serious about following it here on GamecockCentral.com. Wes, you do a great job, man. We appreciate the update.
Thanks, Emerson. We'll talk to you soon, man.
All right, he's Wes Mitchell. I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for joining us.